Excellencies, Mr. Philippe Claus, Mayor of Brussels, and greetings to my colleague Marina Diatovelli from the World Tourism Organization. Ladies and gentlemen, my congratulations for this very important summit. It is at its end, at its closing, and we can say that now we had the second edition of Destinations for All. This World Summit allowed me time ago to meet Isabel Durschmann, as at the United Nations actually, and then we decided to keep strengthening our collaboration. Reason why I attended the first edition of Destinations for All in Quebec in 2014. And also my greetings to Vincent Snoek, who is the co-president of this summit. I really miss not having been there with you. You have been so interactive and very productive in your dialogues about accessible tourism and the chain related to all activities to tourism and its accessibility. In my role as United Nations Director of the Division for Inclusive Social Development at the Department of Economic and Social Affairs in New York, it is very important to underline that these important gatherings provide an opportunity to highlight how tourism and leisure for all people of all ages and abilities are key to promote sustainable development. It is fundamental to develop policies that have a holistic approach on the social, economic, and environmental dimensions for the well-being of people and the planet. By doing so, the various stakeholders involved contribute in implementing the 2030 Agenda of the United Nations and its 17 Sustainable Development Goals to leave no one behind. In the case of accessible tourism, implementing the 2030 Agenda, leaving no one behind, means that we can not only focus at the front line of the tourism sector and ignore accessibility within the underbelly. This requires educating people, including those people working for the public good, such as public institutions and policymakers, and the private sector as well, on the reality of disability as a natural part of the human condition, and building a collective attitude that recognizes these diversities as assets that enrich our common humanity. As we know, persons with disabilities or with disabling conditions face many attitudinal barriers, stigma, and discrimination that often translates into or compound a lack of access to essential development services and opportunities such as education, employment, and cultural life. So, why is it smart? Because of the nature of the tourist sector, because of the elements that it involves, such as transportation, dining services, retail services, and artisanal services. A focus on accessible tourism helps to add the business case to the push for realizing the rights and social progress of persons with disabilities or anybody who has a temporary disability or a disabling condition. I think of somebody who might have a broken leg, a pregnant woman, allergies, or invisible disabilities or disabling conditions, such as, for instance, needing to have dialysis. So addressing accessibility through the lens of tourism will by necessity bring together big business, the public sector, workers, and civil society in just the kind of multifaceted partnerships that will be necessary to evoke the kind of social transformation that we need. For example, efficient and accessible transportation systems can provide independent access to employment, education, and health care facilities, and to social and recreational activities. Data from Europe and the United States has shown transportation as a frequent cited obstacle to the participation of people with disabilities, discouraging people from seeking work and limiting access to health services, even in these highly developed countries. So, ensuring accessibility in tourism is a keystone in building an economic and social foundation that can help to avoid the so-called tragedy of development. I wish to share a specific example and some data. Let me elaborate on SDG 11, the Sustainable Development Goal 11, that talks about sustainable cities and communities. You see, more than half of the world's population now lives in urban areas. By the year 2050, the figure will have risen to 6.5 billion people. That means 2/3 of all humanity. Sustainable development cannot be achieved without significantly transforming the way we build and manage our urban spaces. The rapid growth of cities in the developing world, coupled with increasing rural to urban migration, has led to a boom in megacities. Well, why did I pick up as an example cities? Because cities are often attractions for tourists. In a globalized world, accessible and inclusive urban planning becomes essential, and tourism can contribute enormously to ensure an inclusive and accessible transformation. See, this vision of urban transformation marries practical need with a moral imperative. While it encourages us to embrace the inevitable growth of urban spaces, it reminds us that these spaces should benefit all who inhabit them, both now and in the future. This vision of urban transformation draws our attention to the social, environmental, and economic impact of urban spaces. Ensuring safe streets, adequate housing, accessible infrastructures, and quality services is about more than building codes and material used to do this. It is about giving attention to accessibility in all its forms: access to sanitation, participation governance, property ownership, access to education, age-friendly spaces, and disability-friendly spaces. Cities are destinations for all, and tourism can play a leading role towards this transformation. With attention to sustainability in its truest sense, cities must evolve into fully functional socio-environmental ecosystems. Attention must be given to meeting the physical, social, and economic needs of the inhabitants and the tourists who visit them, while ensuring sustainable use of resources. So how do we move forward? The best strategy for achieving accessible and inclusive destinations for all is usually incremental improvement. Initial efforts should focus on removing basic environmental barriers. Once the concept of accessibility has become ingrained and as more resources become available, it becomes easier to raise standards and attain a higher level of universal design. Attention to accessibility as an afterthought has proven much more expensive than ensuring that all abilities are accommodated in the initial design. But even where retrofitting is needed, the returns on the investment will be easily seen. An effective focus on accessibility and inclusion in tourism would include adopting universal design in public transit and infrastructure. For services vehicles, this could include ensuring that all entry points are accessible to travelers with physical, sensory, or cognitive learning disabilities. Using low-floor transit vehicles, as has been adopted in the rail, tram, and bus services in many high-income countries, proved to be effective. For infrastructure, this involves setting standards for accessible entry, pathways, and so on. Second point, ensuring visual, tactile, and audible warning systems that allow independent mobility, allowing both safety and guidance. Another point, ensuring continuity in the travel chain. This requires going beyond the vehicles themselves to ensure that every user-dependent aspect of a trip is accessible and inclusive, from starting point to destination, including pedestrian access to scheduling information, trip navigation, etc. And then we have also staff education to ensure that all service providers are well aware of the needs of clients of various abilities and have the skills necessary to provide effective service to these individuals. The link between promoting accessibility as a human right and promoting the broader economic and social benefits of this inclusive development strategy has often been overlooked in the past. However, as the international community is working to shift development planning toward sustainability and inclusion, there is growing recognition of the benefits of ensuring that tourism, from transportation to accommodation and other public use and or publicly provided services and infrastructures, are not disabling. Today, as advocates for accessible tourism and destinations for all, you are in a unique position. You are in a position that lead by example and show the world how to implement a truly coherent and integrated approach to sustainable social and economic development through a tourism that protects the environment and leaves no one behind. We in the United Nations and in the Division for Inclusive Social Development, we are looking forward to the outcome of your summit and how it can support the endeavors of the United Nations in implementing the 2030 Agenda and promote destinations and tourism for all people of all ages and of all abilities. Thank you.